mechanics of understanding in place, so that if you do want to go the law enforcement route, you know what to do and when to do it. So it's a very simple bill, but it does flip the incentives and it creates accountability and transparency where today there's really none.
I want to get deeper into the bill. As I said, I think it has the potential to create a lot of change across the country. But I also want to talk first about misconceptions, because there are a lot of them, you know, within this issue, and especially with, for instance, the Rolling Stone controversy. For some reason, media has focused on the details of cases and false reporting. I've even been talking to my friends, telling them I'm doing this story, and sometimes acquaintances and people often say, but what about false reporting? You know, false reporting is something that, you know, happens. I just want to clarify, and either of you can answer, what are the statistics on false reporting? How common is it?
Well, it's like statistics in a lot of, as you already pointed out, statistics are hard to get a hold of. I can tell you, handling sexual assault cases as a prosecutor for years, hundreds of cases, that what a victim goes through when they come forward and say, I have been assaulted, the notion that someone is going to do that falsely is unrealistic. I'm not saying there's never been a false report, but our problem in this area is not false reporting, it's underreporting. There is a small percentage of false reporting. There is a giant universe of women, for all understandable reasons, the most personally painful moment and private moment of their life, they don't want to share it. They don't want to share it with people they love. They don't want to share it with people they trust. They don't want to share it with anyone, much less a stranger, much less be subjected to the glances, the second guessing, the accusations of false reporting, the depositions, the cross-examinations, the very violating personal physical examinations. So if you look at the ladder that a sexual assault victim has to climb to get justice, if anybody thinks that climb is something you embark upon for a lark, or just because you're personally mad at someone, they don't understand how steep the ladder really is. So I was sick about the Rolling Stone article, because I knew it would get some people distracted from the main problem, which is making victims make sure they have good support, good information, and a good understanding of what the process will look like.
And it's really affected the movement, and I encourage other media organizations to not be afraid to cover these stories anymore. I think a lot of people have backed away and sort of focused on, you know, these other issues that, like you just mentioned, are sort of side issues. This isn't what people should be focusing on. But you know, as someone who's prosecuted these crimes, should schools be adjudicating these cases?
Well, first to understand, there's two different results here. One is about keeping a campus safe. That's what Title IX is. Title IX is saying if you're going to take federal money, we expect you to keep your campus safe and free of discrimination. The other system is if you break the law, you're going to go to jail and lose your personal liberty. Those two systems shouldn't look alike, because the outcomes are much different. The worst that happens to somebody under Title IX is they get expelled. If you're convicted of forcible rape or sodomy, you're going to go to prison for a long time and be a sex offender for the rest of your life. So, you know, these should be different systems, and there should be different requirements. But in both systems, you should have people that are trained to understand the nature of this crime, to understand the kinds of questions that should be answered, the kinds of questions that shouldn't ever be asked. And that's what we saw when we really started looking at this, that the Title IX system was so incompetent in understanding the breadth and depth of this issue that they were doing just inherently a terrible job at adjudicating whether or not someone was going to be safe on campus. But in a perfect world, that victim gets good information immediately, gets the physical exam, goes to the police, encounters a trained police officer that knows how to do a good forensic interview, encounters a prosecutor's office with trained sex crimes prosecutors, and brings the perpetrator to justice and puts them in prison where they belong.
I've talked to college presidents who ask the same question, saying, you know, why do we have to have any system at all? Well, if I was a college president, I would certainly want tools to get a rapist off my campus. If I have to wait for the full legal process to run its course, that could be 2 years, it could be 3 years. And what the studies and statistics and experts do tell us is rape is a date gone badly. It's not a he said, she said confusion, too much drinking. It's typically a predator who premeditates his crime, targets his victim in advance, and will commit that crime on average 6 times during his college career. So if you have a rapist on campus and you're a college administrator, you need to get him off your campus. And so what that process really can do is not only get a serial rapist off campus sooner than a criminal trial could, but also, if you don't have enough evidence, you might be able to do accommodations. And that's really important for a survivor to not have to sit with somebody in their science class, or be able to move their dorms, or if they're under a lot of trauma and stress and have a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder after this rape, that their class schedule can be changed. Those are accommodations only a school can make. So they have to have some authority and some process to meet out those accommodations if warranted. And so both processes need to be strengthened. Neither of them are getting it right by and large, and we can do that. This is the first step in strengthening the school process, and with this MOU, it will create an opportunity for us to do more work in the criminal justice area as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of schools have changed their policies in the last couple of years. Harvard is one school that changed their policy, and then law professors from Harvard stood up, as you know, and they said the policy has actually gone too far. It lacks the basic elements of due process and fairness. What was your opinion of that policy, and do you think they went too far? And if so, what is the happy medium there?
Well, I think that we're not denying someone their liberty. We're not putting them in prison. We are focused on a safe campus environment. So I think a preponderance is a fair standard, and that is the standard that has been promulgated by a dear colleague letter by the federal government, and I think that's a fair standard. On the other hand, I think Kirsten and I have worked very hard, along with our colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats, to make sure we've included due process in the legislation. There needs to be transparency. Both parties should be entitled to a lawyer. Both parties should have a clear understanding of what's at stake and understand, and right now, frankly, that's not the case. So we want fairness. It's not that we want the scales to be tilted one way or another, but we do want competence in these systems, and that's what this legislation really is designed about. Fairness, transparency, but competence.
I know it's probably difficult to judge this, but based on what you saw from Ellie's hearing at the University of Arkansas, how do you think those panelists dealt with
Not
this
very
situation?
well.
No. They came across as extremely uninformed, not trained. I think they made her feel horrible. So after she said no 500 times and was being raped, this woman says, so did you feel pressure? I mean, that's an insulting question, insults her honesty, integrity, and clarity, and I don't know how that could be asked after she just said what she said. So it angered me that some survivor had to go through that kind of really untrained questioning.
An ignorant question.
Ignorant.
The guy tried to intimate that clearly she didn't fight hard enough if her arms weren't bruised. It wasn't enough that her thighs were bruised or her pubic area was bruised, but rather if her arms weren't bruised, somehow that, that's just ignorance, and of somebody who doesn't understand the nature of the crime, the domination, the psychology of the crime, and that if women had to be bruised in order to be a victim of rape, we'd have a lot fewer rapists in prison.
And you can hear her emotional response. I should clarify, and I think you all saw this, but during the hearing, the hearing's over an hour, so there's so much conversation that goes on there, and so we tried to put, select bites in there while still clarifying that everything was sequential, but not everything was back to back, so you'll see the minute at the top for where it happened in the conversation, so I just want that, to be clear.
That had to be challenging.
Yeah.
To represent an over an hour hearing of something
We
that's
we wanted we looked at the whole thing, we wanted the tone to be representative of what the whole hearing was. So we just want to make sure that it's obviously, a fair representation. What else here? Senator Gillibrand, why aren't more college presidents standing up? Of course some have, but why aren't more coming forward, admitting wrongdoing if there's wrongdoing to admit, and really committing themselves to change? It just seems like very sort of, crisis management 101, just kind of get it over with and commit to change.
Well, I think there's a huge disconnect, and I've talked to a number of college presidents, and they're very defensive. They really feel, in some instances, that this is over their head, and they have have to take responsibility for their campuses, and they have to take responsibility for safety. It's what Title IX requires. It is part of their job. And to hear someone say, well, it's just too complicated, or these cases are too difficult, well, do your best, but have a fair process that has transparency and accountability. Some schools have already had to been dragged through the mud by the Department of Justice or by the Department of Education through investigations. But some schools really are standing up. The State University of New York, the college presidents have not only endorsed the bill, but are welcoming it. They didn't know how to get it right for a long time, and they're working really hard to do so. I've talked to college presidents who have implemented their own campus surveys, who've implemented their own training requirements, because they're trying very hard. And there's a great book, John Krakauer's book, Missoula, which talks all about what happened in Montana on a college campus and through the criminal justice system. And that college president is portrayed as someone who's really sincere and worked really hard to get rapists off campus. But he was eventually moved aside for whatever reasons. You really see the politics of it. So I can't speak for any one college president about why they push back, but if they're really sincere about keeping a safe campus, they're gonna wanna get this right. And once these surveys come out, they will have a very clear snapshot in time about how safe or not safe their campus is, where the trouble areas are, areas they can look into and attack themselves. It will make a difference for them. It will be a very valuable tool for all administrations to figure out how to get it right.
I will say, I think the majority of the presidents I've encountered since we began working on this are sponge-like in wanting to know what else can they do. I think we've got everyone's attention at this point. I think most administrators realize that they were not doing as well as they should have. My university, University of Missouri, the president has been on a mission. I mean, they have hired a top experienced litigator in this area to be their Title IX coordinator. Somebody who knows this very well. They've mandated more reporting across campus. They've worked very, I mean, he really has taken this seriously. They had a couple of bad incidents at the University of Missouri several years ago. On the other hand, we had a top star on our football team at the University of Missouri. This is how we've turned the corner, hopefully, who was not convicted of anything, but in looking at the evidence, it was clear he engaged in domestic violence, even though the victim didn't come forward to hold him criminally accountable. Now, in the old days, if you're not criminally convicted and you're a star on the football team at an SEC school, I mean, you don't even break stride, right? Well, they kicked him off the team without any kind of criminal case ever being brought. And I was really proud of my university when they did that. That's different. That's much different. So I'm optimistic. Now, there's an organization that has not been helpful, but it helps lobby for higher education. They've been very defensive and unhelpful, as lobbyists usually are. But I see a glimmer of optimism among the administrators in my state, and I think across the country, that now realize they got to take this much more seriously.
And then just to talk about the bill, the climate survey, Senator Gillibrand talked about it a little bit. The reason I'm really excited about that is because if I were a prospective college student, you know, imagine you're looking at all your schools, you'll remember when you were doing that. You can go to their websites, hopefully when this passes, and actually see how students feel that they handle sexual assault. And that's something as a student, if this were, it wasn't a big issue when I was looking at schools, but if it were right now, you know, kids, nieces, cousins, I would want them to be able to see this. So that's what I love. The one part, I guess, is my favorite part of the bill. But can you talk a little bit about what you're excited about in this bill?
Yeah, I think the survey is game changing. I think it is a piece of information that will very much change the college's willingness and interest in getting it right, because it is going to be clear. Are they good on this or not? Is there a place where people can report and feel comfortable reporting or not? And what is the response like? That is going to be very vital information. And so, because this will completely flip the incentives, they have a reason to take these cases seriously. The training's necessary. Having that confidential advisor, I think, also will be significant, because for a lot of survivors, having trust in even the school system or the criminal justice system is lacking. So having someone who will help them navigate, these are your options here, these are your options there, explain everything in advance, it keeps her able to decide what she or he needs to do to fully press their charges, and which space they want to be in. So that is going to be vital. And then basic training. I mean, honestly, there should be state-of-the-art training at every school.
Made clear in the hearing
12 to 24 hours is very, very important. A victim that knows where they can go in the first 12 to 24 hours to talk to someone who is knowledgeable, I think is, in fact, the most important part of this bill. Because if a victim knows where they can go on campus and knows that it will be confidential, then they go safely. And then they get really good information. They get someone who is trained to understand the difference between going to the hospital in 3 days versus going right now. Trained to understand the difference between a preliminary hearing and a grand jury, and the difference between a Title IX adjudication and a criminal conviction. The more information that victim can get from a safe source in that first 12 to 24 hours almost always dictates the outcome of a case. And so the fact that we're putting that requirement of a confidential advisor that is well known on campus where someone can go, I think will protect a lot of women from rapists going forward, because I think more women will come forward out of the shadows and hold these guys or gals accountable for the crimes they've committed. And so that's the part that I think is the most important, along with the requirement of some kind of memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement, so you can begin that communication and contact where hopefully you can not be relying on a room full of folks to decide whether or not someone's going to be kicked out of school or just suspended, but rather a jury sitting in a box deciding whether or not somebody should go to the penitentiary.
It's not easy getting a bill passed, of course, especially now. What is the plan? How are you going to get this bill passed? So many people are depending on you.
She and I are maniacs.
Yeah, we're gonna get this done. We're very optimistic because we've already seen great support. We have 12 Republicans across the political spectrum.
It's great.
So stalwarts who focus on judicial issues like Chuck Grassley, to newcomers like Kelly Ayotte, Joni Ernst, and Shelley Moore Capito, they're all on the bill. So we are going to have wide bipartisan support. We also have it's been agreed that we're going to have a hearing on this issue in the appropriate committee, and from that hearing we'll be able to hopefully get floor time, and we're supposed to pass an education bill this year, so this will be a very large component of it. So I'm very optimistic that we will have certainly more than half the Senate on it by the time it's introduced in the committee. So I'm
We have folks
very
on this
optimistic.
bill that don't agree with each other on anything, but they're agreeing on this bill. I mean, it really is remarkable, and we do think we have a vehicle that we can put it on that will move. That's part of the problem in Congress
Just
right
getting
now.
time.
Finding a place that you can put something that will actually get through. So, and she and I worked on military sexual assault together, and we got an awful lot done.
Yeah.
And we are
Not many people saw all the good things we got done, but
Yeah.
a lot got done.
That's good to know.
And we did some good reforms this year as well. So we're just going to keep working until it's done. But this bill, I think, has momentum, and I think with the great coverage that you've put towards it, along with other filmmakers and authors, it's part of the national dialogue. And frankly, nothing ever gets done until regular people stand up and demand action. And this movement is truly a survivor-led movement. I didn't even know about the issue until 2 young women asked for a meeting and said, we appreciate all you've done in the military context, but that happened to us on our college campus. And these 2 young women, Annie and Andrea, told their story and said, we were raped both at Chapel Hill. We reported our rapes. Not only were we disbelieved, but we were retaliated against for reporting, and we got no justice. But instead of doing nothing and just accepting their fate, they rose up, they started speaking truth to power, and they've traveled all across America on college campus after college campus, standing with other survivors, demanding more from their administrations. You covered those rallies. I mean, this is a movement. It's a student-led movement of young men and young women who are demanding change, and that's when things happen, when regular people stand up and demand action.
We're close to getting to allowing you guys to ask some questions, so if you want to start thinking about them, this is a good time. The bill can really pressure colleges to change their policies and to change the way they handle these cases. One thing that I would imagine is harder to change is this culture that's on campus, and we're continuously reminded of this week after week. There are new reports of, for instance, last week, Penn State, I don't know if you saw this, but a fraternity was suspended for a few years because members were found to be posting photos of unconscious nude women, and it's so horrifying, and at the same time it's become normalized because you see it all the time how do you, and this is a question for you guys too that I'll throw out after I ask the senators, how do you change this culture on campus?
You convict rapists and send them to jail. And you define rape as the violent felony that it is. We have to stop this fallacy that rape is some college prank, and that it's just some date gone badly, or, oh, there was too much alcohol, or
too many hookups going
yeah,
on.
hookup culture. That's BS. And people have to recognize rape is a serious, violent crime perpetrated by recidivists who are predators, who target their victims in advance and do it over and over and over again. That is the nature of rape. It is not a crime of romance. It is a crime of violence. That's why you see both male and female victims perpetrated by rapists.
And a lot of this too just comes down to courage. It's just good old-fashioned bravery for all of you and for students on every campus in this country. Those guys at Penn State who posted the nude, unconscious women online, they did it because they knew they would have acceptance in their circle. They didn't do that because they thought everybody was going to castigate them on campus and call them names. They did it because within their group, it was cool to post a naked, unconscious woman online. Now, somebody in that circle had to be brave. Not the administrator, but somebody in that circle had to say, what the F are you doing? You know, this is not cool. You are not cool for doing this. You're sick. You are a sick man doing this. And, you know, that's what I hope out of this movement. It's not just the survivors that need to get amped up about this. It needs to be people who are standing by, and this whole campaign on It's On Us. Anybody who is silent when that is going on and doesn't express disapproval is part of the problem. Now, I know it takes courage, because you don't want to stand out, you don't want to be with the one person saying something, but that's what it's going to take, because I guarantee you there were a lot of people who saw those pictures online who didn't think it was cool. They didn't say anything.
Yeah, it's true. Anything else you want to mention about the bill before we go to audience Q&A? Anyone have any questions? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I've been snatching my hand because I wanted to say something. I am an advocate in a local campus in the DC area, and when people talk about what is it going to take to change things, yes, we need to be better about education on campus, but we need money. We need funding to run prevention programs and education, and sometimes we don't necessarily have the funding to do that, or have the staff to do that. And not to disparage my school, because I think that we're doing a great job, but I think sometimes we lose sight of the practicalities of like how we're actually going to accomplish these things. Because when you have students who are being fired up and ready to go and do things about it, and you have a lot of administrators and staff members like myself who are really passionate about this issue, there's so much that we could accomplish if we had the proper funding to be able to do that. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Do you have any guidance?
Well, I don't mean to, I'm bad at this. I know I should tell you what you want to hear. We're going to try to get you more funding.
No.
But let me just say, there's only one place in America where the cost has gone up by multiples of inflation every year, and it's been college campuses. The price of college education has risen more dramatically than anything else in America over the last 2 decades. We are paying football coaches and presidents at universities and
millions of dollars.
lots and lots and lots and lots of money. If they can't prioritize enough money to allow advocates and professors who care and advocates who care enough money to do a little bit of programming, then shame on them. So I would
Go ahead.
A similar question regarding the bill and the survey that you're looking to administer at the campuses every 2 years. I'm curious to know your thoughts on whether or not the university should handle that themselves, and then also what the anticipation of the funds would be for those to execute those surveys.
The DOA, the Department of Education, does the survey. So they're going to do the survey, and then it's going to be an online survey, so that doesn't cost a lot of money. And the Department of Education will collate and host it. So The school will participate by saying, the survey's available online for you to fill out, please fill it out, it's your right to fill it out, but the cost and the burden is borne by Department of Education.
So, I'm sorry. So the expectation is that the students will take it with enough of a response rate such that it will be valuable at offering
Right,
any type
and
of
so the
incentive?
school would encourage the students to do that, and they could do that in whatever format they want to do that.
And I think what we'd find is if we didn't get enough response rate, then I think the Department of Education would put it on the school. You're not doing enough to publicize the survey. You're not doing enough to get the word of the survey out. We need to see what you're doing. Because obviously if we're not getting enough surveys back to make it statistically valid, that's going to be partly the university's responsibility for not doing a good enough job of promoting the survey.
If they're invested.
Yeah, but they're going to be invested because the Department of Education is going to be the one figuring out that nobody's filling out the survey, and then they'll start asking the questions.
They'll know the participation rate, it's raw numbers, so. So the school has to work with the Department of Education, but they will design the survey and collate the survey and do all the work around it. The school just has to ask students to fill it out.
How about the young man in the green?
So I know you said, at an individual level, we have to have courage, and I really respect that. But I'm sure a lot of us are leaders in our student governments at our colleges. I know I'm on I'm on the executive board at UConn. So what would you encourage student governments to do at a formal level to really make change at our campuses?
Well, I think the It's On Us program is very important. It needs to be embraced. I was really encouraged when, in fact, this is when the vice crew was out in Missouri. I went all around to all the campuses in Missouri, most of them, and if I didn't get to them, then they came to one of the campuses I went to. And I was really encouraged by some of the students that came and presented their It's On Us campaigns that they were doing on campus. I think that you all have an ability to cut through the orientation process better than the administration does. I think this information that new students get, they're just getting so much new information that a lot of it kind of, it doesn't really sink in. If I were running a student government right now, I'd try to brainstorm how can we separate orientation about this problem and understanding where they can go for help and where a confidential advisor is. What could we do around orientation to make it more dramatic and so it would stick more with a new student? Because it is true that the chances of someone being assaulted are much greater the first 6 months they're on campus. So I would maybe focus on that.
And also focus on consent education, making sure students truly understand if she's passed out, she can't consent. There's a very good viral video about a cup of tea that was hysterically funny. So if she said she wanted a cup of tea, you can offer the cup of tea, but if she's passed out, don't pour it down her throat. That's the same thing as, it's very funny.
Hi. The film addressed how there's very clear, especially recently, highly publicized cases of athletics being associated with this problem very directly. But you guys sort of kind of just brushed by another major institution that has a role in this. I think that's fraternities and fraternity life. I was wondering if your bill addresses that in any significant way, or if you have any thoughts on the issue.
We don't tell schools what to do, how to dictate their campus life. But when a school has a survey and they see a whole host of allegations about one problem center on the school, whether it's an off-campus bar, whether it's off-campus housing, whether it's a certain fraternity, that's information they can do something about. Every school's different. So these tools we're trying to give schools will give them a real picture of where the problems lie. It will help them figure out how to make their campuses safer.
Some universities are working with the landlords of the fraternities are in fact the alumni associations, house corporations I think they're called. They're working with them to try to put lease provisions in that would require certain, just like you have with your landlord if you're renting an apartment, there would be lease requirements about certain activities that surround sometimes these assaults, alcohol, who's in the building, who isn't in the building, and when. And so some campuses are going at it like that to get at the problem that is represented by Greek life on some campuses.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm just wondering, you guys I know mentioned a lot about a coordinator which students could reach on campus that they would, a very well-known coordinator who they could go to within the first 12 to 24 hours. GW recently implemented somebody, not very well known, but I have to say that my university is actually stepping forward when these kinds of allegations come about. And I was wondering what the two of you thought is most pivotal for a school to have, if it's the first step or just whether they're moving forward. What is the most important component of a plan that a university can have to helping a student get through this process or moving this process forward?
I think the most important is having a point where students know they can go if they have been assaulted, and at that point remain confidential unless and until the student wants other help. The reason that's the most, and by the way, it doesn't do any good to have that if no one knows about it. So I went on some campuses and the administration was all puffed up saying, oh, well, we have this program, this program, and then I just turn to the students and say, okay, if you were raped on Friday night, would you know where to go? And raise your hand if you would know where to go. And of course, nobody would raise their hand. So that program doesn't do anybody any good if somebody who's actually in the moment doesn't know where to go. So I think not only having that point, but more importantly, making sure students know where that point is. Because the problem is now, if they just go and tell their RA, the RA is a mandated reporter. So they no longer get to choose whether or not this case goes forward. They may go to a professor. That professor is probably a mandated reporter. So making sure that student knows where they go and making sure that place, they still have the option of being confidential. That's the most important thing that has to happen.
And the reason why I agree with Claire on that very much is because oftentimes if they go to the wrong person or someone who's a mandated reporter, they don't ask the right questions in the right order. They actually often aren't trained sufficiently, and so that survivor doesn't want to participate. So when someone says to you, well, what were you wearing? Well, were you drinking? Were you drunk? Did you pre-game? Well, did you know him? That is not going to elicit someone who's going to eventually pursue a case if it's done in the wrong way. You have to say, what do you remember? And you have to take them through this process in a way that retains their ability to be in control and also retains all the information. If you don't have that first point person be a well-trained individual, you may scare that survivor who will never go to a court, never go to a criminal justice, or never push forward.
And you know what happens with a lot of the victims is that they don't remember everything because they have been drinking. So they think, well, I better say, because if I say I don't remember, then they won't believe me. So then they provide a detail that maybe is not truthful because they're trying to bootstrap their credibility because the person's asking them questions that makes them feel like I should know the answer to this.
Right.
So it's the difference between a trained forensic interview that understands the psychology going on versus someone who just starts rapid fire asking questions, and you end up with somebody that's called in a liar when in reality they were desperately trying to get someone to believe them because it really had occurred.
Just one more question. Go ahead.
Hi, Senator Gilbert. I know you mentioned the importance of training on campus and particularly of consent education. And a lot of students obviously come to campus because of the variety of sex education programs across the U.S. They come to campus with no understanding of those issues. And I know obviously that sex ed is a politically contentious issue, but is there any possible legislative remedy for that?
Well, we have several of us are on a bill to begin age-appropriate consent education in high school. Tim Kaine wrote a bill to do that, and so we're hoping to have an opportunity to vote on that bill as well, which would provide basic funding for age-appropriate consent education. I mean, they begin consent education in 5th grade, 6th grade in some schools, as long as it's age-appropriate. And but there's two things at issue: appropriate education, but also, are we valuing our women and girls? And if you look across all culture, media, how women are being portrayed, sometimes we aren't valuing them. You look at something as simple as equal pay for equal work. We don't even have that yet. There's a lot of indicia throughout society that we're not valuing women and girls. And so that has to change culturally. And one way to do it is certainly provide them a safe education.
The bill, you should look it up. If you Google healthy relationships, Tim Kaine, you'll find it. But it is teach healthy relationships. By the way, this is also important in areas like domestic violence. It's important in some of the ways that Kirsten enumerated, but and this would be education that would be going on K through 12, not in college, because we're much younger. Probably would work better than the DARE program.
That's really good. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you want to get involved in prevention, you can go to itsonus.com or nrape on campus. Excuse me, not .com, itsonus.org and rapeoncampus.org. You guys probably already know that. And then for anybody who's watching online, you can watch the segment in full on HBO 11 p.m. Friday night. And then for all you guys who are here, please join us for drinks and appetizers in the art gallery. Thanks so much for coming.